Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, we're here once again with Brother Abdul Karim from the sunny skies of Southeast Asia in Kuala Lumpur, and where he's ensconced doing whatever ensconced people do. And I'm here in sunny Kentucky, in the middle of the state here, enjoying the wonderful fall weather. And we're trying to uncover, reveal, discuss, enumerate, review, elaborate on the various problems that that Muslims have suffered as a result of their misguidance due to the so-called Sunnah of the Prophet, which is the example of the Prophet, which was not really written down for the first 200 years after his death. And so that's the body of the Hadith, which is attributable to the Prophet of the Sunnah, to the habits, the life of the Prophet, the Sunnah of the Prophet, what the Muslims call. And this is supposed to act as an example for Muslims to model their own lives and activity after. Well, I think Muslims were doing their best to adjust to this modified approach to Islam when Baghdad was destroyed. And I remember reading about that destruction, not in any Muslim book. I couldn't find it. It's not mentioned, really. And if it is, it's mentioned in passing. What I found was a very detailed description in one of Will Durant's volumes on the history of Muhammad there. I forget which volume it was. And I was really shocked to read this. I read Will Durant's history twice, all 11 volumes of it. It's just remarkable group of writing. He and his wife, God bless them, did an extraordinary deed for all of mankind by recording history as they possibly could, as best as they possibly could, about 60, 70 years ago now. And I still haven't found anybody that surpasses their effort. Anyway, I read about this destruction of Baghdad and why it occurred. And I was a research fellow at ISTAC in Kuala Lumpur at the time. And I was shocked. I was shocked to find these things out, because the behavior that preceded the destruction of Baghdad was absolutely and totally and completely un-Islamic. And this was done by the Caliphate at the time. And so I inquired my colleagues, and nobody seemed to know about it or care. And none of the students, of all the master's and PhD students that I had, and I inquired about them, and these were all people who were born into Islam from all countries all over the world, not just from Malaysia. None of them knew that the Sultan of Baghdad at the time preceding the destruction of Baghdad, none of them knew that the Caliph had so mistreated the delegates that Genghis Khan had sent to Baghdad in order to introduce himself peacefully to the Muslim nations and conduct a trade, because that's what he was interested in doing. He didn't ask the Muslims to surrender or anything like that, like he usually did with the other countries, other nations that he conquered. He was offering an exchange. Let's trade, which is exactly what the Prophet encouraged when he was with us, you see. He told people, if you go to China, learn what they know, because they know a whole lot more than you do. You stupid Arabs. All you know is dung and desert sand. All right. What do you know of the Chinese? All right. So anyway, Genghis sends his delegates here. He sends 3 of them, and they're all mistreated and murdered, and especially the last one, the last delegation. The first 2, he said, "Oh, they must have misunderstood my intention." So he finally sends a 3rd delegation, includes his favorite nephew, and the Sultan sends back the nephew's head to Genghis Khan. And that's when Genghis sent his sons to destroy Baghdad. Now, when I reviewed this history, and it's documented, Will Durant did not make it up, all right? No, it's well documented. It's just been, how shall I say, avoided in the history teaching of Islam amongst the Muslim students. Well, it's an embarrassment, isn't it? And it's a frank discovery of the fact that the Muslims were not the least bit Islamic in their treatment of Genghis Khan. So I'm sure, dear brother, the reason I'm bringing this up is that I'm sure it must have raised some hackles on some revisionist somewhere along the line that must have stood up like John Huss and said, "We're not doing this thing right. Let's get on with doing the corrections. What's wrong? What are we doing wrong that the son of Genghis Khan can stand in the middle of our greatest masjid and say, 'I am the hammer of God sent to destroy you because you have sinned'?" This is the fact. This is what the greatest leaders at the time, and you almost say, well, it was the height of the golden age, wasn't it? Islam never recovered from this destruction. Now, this is a pivotal point in Islamic history that goes undiscussed. I've never heard anyone discuss this in any forum celebrating the wonders of Islam, because there's nothing wondrous about it. It's pure, unadulterated, unredeemed nafs at work, dealing with the most terrible of crimes, which is human pride. We're the chosen ones. Well, that's what they were saying. We're the chosen ones. God's on our side. We don't have to treat these people with human decency. So, with that being said, it's maybe not the best of introduction to the subject, and I'm sure there are people much more capable of discussing it more thoroughly than I am. But I always found this very interesting, and I still haven't found, when I still bring the subject up, I'm still confronted by people that don't know. And these are informed people, supposedly informed adim. So I had to go to a non-Islamic source. Well, if you want to use that term, it's kind of, Will Durant was a theologian, and I can sort of, well, it depends on how you want to look at him, whether or not he was a failed or a successful theologian, because the most successful Christian theologian is the one who abandons Christianity, as far as I'm concerned. And I'm not so sure that he did that, but he never went back to finish his divinity degree or make use of it. He just went on to become this world-renowned historian, who wrote so beautifully and elegantly about the foolishness and follies and great expectations and great achievements of mankind. I'm still astounded that people don't know these facts, especially Muslims, of Islamic history. And it's not discussed. But what I'm looking for here, as a reflection from your knowledge of events and your knowledge of Islamic history and philosophy and theocratic exploits, if you will, is, well, what were the repercussions of this destruction? I mean, besides the generations it must have taken for Muslims to try and recover their decency, there must have been some kickback on the part of revisionists to this episode, either immediately or somehow following up, or maybe there were revisionists who were actually standing there warning the caliph, don't do this. Don't do this. You don't know who this man is. This is the hammer of God. There must have been somebody there in the court saying, don't do it, you see. And so I'm interested in finding out who those people were and letting our brothers and sisters and students know of their existence and what they did and how they were treated by Muslims for trying to correct the situation or even prevent it, you see. Because what the Muslims did to invite this destruction was the exact opposite of what Islam was meant to be and perform as a political entity. And they had everything going for them at that time, but they were also in the midst of this mesmerization, by the Hadith, you see, which, if our premise is correct, in that it is not revelation and it can't be equated with revelation. It certainly can't be elevated to a position above revelation, which is the Quran. If Muslims have done this, and they did do this, and they're in the middle of this, and they're celebrating their glory as a result of this lie, this complete set of fabrications, you see, then they brought this on themselves, as a matter of speaking. The Muslim peoples brought it on themselves. And you can say, oh, well, the innocent Muslim on the street, he didn't bring it on himself. Well, that's not the way the Quran looks at it. The Quran looks at the thing as if, I always like to use this one example because it's so sweet, you see. A drunk husband invites his wife and kids to get in the car with him. And the mother assents and gets in the car with the drunk husband and drives off and gets them all killed. Whose fault is that? Well, you can say, okay, well, it's the husband, but did not the mother get in the car and assent to this false leadership, to this misguidance? Well, that's what Muslims did. And you say, oh, they don't have any choice. Well, yes, there is a choice. Quran makes that pretty clear. You chose to blindly follow what your leaders told you, what your fathers told you. That's a theme over and over and over in the Quran. So there's no excuse for this kind of behavior. Besides, what the Sultan did was complete and blatantly unjust. There's no call in Islam to murder a delegation from a foreign country that's come in peace, and wants to establish relationship. That's a perfect opportunity for dawah. So I'm sitting here, and of course we're 800 years behind the fact here, after the fact here, but look, this was Islam's golden age, and I went to all these conferences when I was there. How many conferences on the golden age of Islam, Muslims are failing at every scientific frontier right now. And the only thing they can do is go back and look at the golden age when they weren't failing. And I'm sitting here saying this was a major failure of the golden age, you see. And no one's talking about it. There's no approach to tauba here after the fact. I mean, when I realized what took place there, when I realized, and I confirmed the history, because there were historians who know, they just don't want to talk about it, you see. So I confirmed the history. I said, is Durant right? And I went to this, that, and the next person. And I said, yeah, he's right. That's what they did. And why don't we talk about it? It's embarrassing, isn't it? It's embarrassing. This is human denial. So Islam is still suffering from the same common sins that all men and women suffer from. And human denial is one of them. That's a lie. There's no room in heaven for liars. All right. So let's get that scientific principle right out on the front. There's no room in heaven for liars. I mean, especially those who count a lie against Allah. That's not going to pass on the day of judgment, whatever that day is. Okay. So, dear brother, with that being your introduction, I hand the talking stick over to you and ask you to respond in kind according to whatever it is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed in your heart and in your mind to share with us today, inshallah.
Yeah, thank you, Brother Omar. Let me just begin my customary,
Of course.
Yeah, so how do I put this? You really opened another hornet's nest with that question, but I think the question is justified and very important. I can also confirm that I came to this knowledge relatively recently myself. And when I share some of this knowledge with some of my Muslim friends, they born Muslims, one of them lived in the UK. They also haven't heard about it. You see, this haven't heard about these dark incidents in Islamic history. So the question naturally arises: is there an attempt to sweep all this bad stuff under the carpet? Is there an attempt here to cover up the truth? And do we not know that the meaning of to cover up? What is the Arabic word for covering up? It's kufr. Why is it that people are not willing to look at truth in the face and accept that we messed up, we made some mistakes, now we got to do better from now on? This is a culture of self-denial, as one guest pointed out at one of our conferences when I was still at IIS. Why is it that so many Muslims are sticking their head in the sand just like the proverbial ostrich? Yeah. Why is it that...
Hold on a minute, brother. You're breaking up. The connection is not very good. Hold on to your thoughts there. Can you sign out and sign back in?
Yeah.
It's better now. Did you do something?
Well, I tried to sign out. I pressed some button. I'm not sure.
Well, maybe it's corrected itself. Go back and take your response up from the point where you you discovered these things yourself. You discovered this fact yourself, and then what did you do?
Yeah, like I said, I came to the knowledge of these things quite late. I think there's an attempt to somehow sugarcoat Islamic history, including intellectual history. I could add also, I have recently scanned a book called War and Peace, put out by some institute in Jordan, I think, and one of the editors was Professor Dr. Muhammad Hashim Kamali, my former boss and mentor for nearly a decade. And the other, one of the other editors was Prince Al-Ghazi, I think from the Jordanian royal family. And plus they have another editor, and I found this book on the internet in a PDF format. So, and it's a very long book, by the way, and it's about war and peace. So I scanned it. You can do an easy scan of a full text if it is in PDF format by basically doing a search for a keyword. So I searched for the word jihad al-talab, that expression, which is aggressive, war of aggression, which was part of a lot of Sunni scholars, agenda, including Imam al-Shafi. You see, he endorsed wars of aggression called jihad al-talab on the basis of his acceptance of the alleged abrogation of...
I'm sorry, brother, you're breaking up again.
Still breaking.
And yes. Just go ahead and sign back and just hit the close the tab button.
Yeah.
And then just go back and sign in.
Certainly.
All right.
Let's do that.
That's probably the best thing to do.
Yeah, for sure. Based on the doctrine of jihad al-talab, or the aggressive jihad, and they attack non-Muslims, and there comes a blowback, and the blowback destroys the people who went on the initiative and attacked in the first place, you see. So even the Nazis, look, Napoleon, both of them invaded Russia, waging a war of aggression, and what was the result? The result was the destruction of Napoleon's forces, and the result was also the destruction of the Nazi forces. Look at a picture of Berlin at the end of World War II. You will not see much difference between what it looked like and what Stalingrad looked like. The Nazis got some of their own medicine. So this this is the sunnah of Allah. If you mess up, if you become an aggressor, you're going to have to pay the price. When
Yes.
will people finally learn this lesson and listen to what Allah is telling us in the Quran? Allah does not love aggressors, you see. And verse 193, Surah Al-Baqarah says, there shall be no hostility. Udwan is the Arabic word. No enmity except against the zalimi, the people who are wrongdoers. So we cannot attack non-Muslims just because they happen to be non-Muslims. That's
Yes.
not a good enough reason to start attacking anyone. The doctrine of jihad al-talab says, and by the way, this was supported by Imam al-Shafi'i, Ibn Hazm, Ibn Khaldun, and even Abu Hamid al-Ghazali all supported the doctrine of aggressive, or some people call it preemptive jihad, which says that that it is actually our obligation, it is a religious requirement, the sixth pillar of Islam, to go and attack, first invite non-Muslims to Islam. If they refuse, then ask them for some protection money, just like the mafia will do. And if they refuse to pay the protection money, then we go and attack them and kill them, or unless they submit, until they submit. So this is really what a friend of mine on Clubhouse described as a gangster Islam. This is not the real Islam.
That's what it is.
Allah has
That's what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So these traditionalists who subscribe to this doctrine of jihad al-talab, they have basically turned the ummah into a mafia. Now, how much worse can it get? You see, I am not a mafioso, and I'm not prepared to go harm anybody just because he happens to think differently about matters. If he tries to harm me, of course I have a right to defend myself, and I will, inshallah. But if somebody wants to be peaceful with me, I have absolutely no grounds to wage any kind of aggression against him. And this is what the traditional ulama really, where they messed up real bad. And that brings me to the topic I wanted to mention, a massive book called War and Peace in Islam, put out, please, I think, by some institute in Jordan. Editors were my former boss and mentor, Professor Dr. Muhammad Hashim Kamali, and also Prince Ghazi, I think, from the Jordanian royal family. And there was one other editor. I think it's a collection of articles. You can find it online in PDF format. I checked the whole document. And I ran a search whether anybody, so many writers, ever mentions at all, even one time, the expression jihad al-talab, aggressive jihad, which was a very big part of the discussion among the classical ulama. Guess what? Not a single mention, brother. Not even a whisper about this. So now, what kind of treatment do you get of the issue of war and peace in a book that completely disregards this very major blunder on the part of the Muslim scholars who promoted jihad al-talab, an aggressive warfare against non-Muslims, who promoted basically spreading Islam by the sword, which is a total aberration and totally anti-Islamic. So I was really thoroughly shocked. I still am shocked. I'm still trying to come to grips with it. How did such substandard scholarship ever become part of mainstream Islamic teachings? I'm shocked, brother. I'm at a loss for words.
Yeah, it is. It's shocking, but I'm sure that prior to you or I or any one of our generations having realized, I'm sure that there have been others who were just as shocked. You see, and I'm trying to find out, well, who were these people? There must have been others who were just as shocked and said, "Hey, this is the wrath of God. Kublai Khan is correct when he says that he's the hammer of God, and you deserve to be punished, all right, because of your un-Islamic behavior. This is God's decree. This is a divine decree. The fact that I'm sitting in my saddle comfortably in the middle of your masjid after murdering you, okay? This is God's decree, a divine decree against you who were at the helm of Islam's golden age."
And by the way, I did a similar search.
Go on.
I did a similar search on the books of one of my actually favorite sources, the late Dr. Tahajab Irawani, the former chairman of People IT Institute in Virginia, USA. He's done a lot of good work. But when I searched his last 3 books, the expression jihad al-talab, guess what? Same results. I came completely empty-handed. It's as if this never existed. What is this? What is going on here? You see? And even the word jihad in the last 2 of Not that it doesn't even occur. Even the word jihad does not occur in his last two words.
Mm.
In the third one, he mentions jihad a few times, but never as jihad al-talab, never as a war of aggression, never as a sixth pillar of Islam, which the ulama, traditional ulama, beginning with al-Shafi, made into a religious obligation, you see. So I'm really disappointed in so-called Islamic scholarship. I find it. I feel a little bit cheated and deceived, quite frankly. I don't know which Muslim scholar I can trust after this. I mean, we've had
Yeah.
also incidents. I don't want to go on into any personalities. When you look around the world, ask yourself, well, how did this particular Muslim scholar differentiate himself? Oh, he authorized suicide bombings. How about this other Muslim scholar? How did he differentiate himself? Oh, he ended up in prison being accused of multiple rapes. Or how did this other scholar come across? Well, he was accused of plagiarism by another scholar. I mean, I'm looking around. Which scholar is out there that I can actually trust, you see? And of course, also in addition, I could mention that the amount of plagiarism that I have witnessed personally in Muslim institutions is
Yes.
just astounding. It's astonishing. It is
Yes.
like there's no tomorrow. So is it surprising that we do not have a single Muslim university from a population of what, 1.5 billion? We do not have a single Muslim university in the top 150 universities in the world. What is going on? What is going on? Partly
Well,
it is, of course,
just
this anti-rationalism, that we have spoken of. And you were asking me, well, did anybody object to it? And what was the blowback after the
yes, of
sacking of the
course.
Mongol, the Abbasid Empire? Well, one thing that happened after the sacking of the Abbasid Empire was Ibn Taymiyyah, you see. He kind of responded to it, but how did he respond? He became even more extreme in some ways, and he accused the Mongols of being basically hypocrites and disbelievers because they did not rule according to the Sharia, you see. And he even called for the killing of the Mongols rulers at the
I'm
time.
sorry, who was this
So
that you
he
just mentioned? We
Ibn
the
Taymiyyah,
sound destroyed. Ibn Taymiyyah. Oh, okay, okay.
yeah, that's right. And he also, by the way, supported jihad al-talab. I have a quotation that I think is quite clear. So the Muslim thought, at least one, the thinking that we know of, actually became more extreme rather than more moderate, you see. And now we have the modern day Salafis and the militants and the Islamists like Said Qutb, Maududi, and I already mentioned Ibn Taymiyyah. They are also promoting, basically spreading Islam by the sword. This is lunacy, you see. And if anybody tries to do that, I think there's going to be a blowback. Show me one empire out of the series of half a dozen or so Muslim empires that we had that is still standing. The Umayyad Empire was destroyed. The Andalusian Empire didn't last. Then we had the Abbasid Empire was destroyed. Then we have the Mughal Empire in India was destroyed. Then we have the Fatimid Empire in North Africa was destroyed. Then we have the Turkish Empire was also destroyed. Then we have ISIS was also destroyed, the ISIS Caliphate. Saddam Hussein's country was also destroyed. Why? He waged a war of aggression against two countries. He got some blowback, and 1 million civilians, once again, Iraqi people, paid with their lives for his mistake, for his arrogance, and for his ignorance.
It looks like
So,
it looks like the Muslims in the Middle East are being led down the rosy path again here with this recent effort on the part of Hamas, and if Iran is with them, it looks like they're trying to reestablish their empire. You see, with this recent events here in Palestine, and I'm afraid the very same thing is going to happen. Although it's I'm sure, a very sensitive subject here, but it based on previous Muslim efforts after the death of Muhammad. You see, while Muhammad was here, there was no military defeats, to my knowledge. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that every time Muhammad took to the field, there was some sort of advance made on the part of the Islamic enterprise. But after this, after they crossed the Tigris and Euphrates into Iran, they invited, how shall I say, the imperial wrath of the King of Heaven. Can I put it that way? Because this was an invasion, you see. This was not a defensive war. This was an invasion, and there was some pretext of something going on to defend helpless Muslims in the southern parts there. But they took over the whole country, and this is not Islam. Islam is not there to take what is not theirs. Islam is there to persuade people to behave more like decent human beings. So to speak, and place your footings on the right premises as you walk the earth on your return to our creators. That's what Islam is about, and they turned into an imperial enterprise. So it seems to me, I saw some headlines, some quotes on the part of the people in Hamas and whatnot. They're saying, well, this is just the beginning. Netanyahu saying the same thing. Oh, this is just the beginning. We've only just started to mow the grass here. And Hamas is saying, look, we're getting back the empire. We're going to take back what's ours. All right, we're going to wipe Israel off the face of the earth, which is what the Iranians have been saying all along. This rhetoric. Well, this rhetoric has now been it's become fire. Now it's become real fire and real brimstone, and I'm afraid Muslims are going to find out the hard way that they have misinterpreted the Quran by following the Hadith yet one more time. In your experience, after you realize what took place here in Baghdad and why it is that the Mongols were, how shall I say, divinely guided to teach not Islam, but to teach Muslims a lesson, did they learn from this lesson? Did anyone learn from the lesson after the fact? I mean, were there pockets of Islam that said, hey, the opposites were really wrong in this whole approach to dynamic governance under the guidance of under divine guidance? We've got something wrong here. Let's correct it. Did anyone stand up and try and do this along the way, and just to pull away from the opposites and even the Mongols? I mean, there's apologies. Look, and they say, okay, the Muslim apologists, the Hadith apologists say, look what happened here. The Mongols came, they conquered, they killed a couple million people, but they became Muslim. You see, and that's supposed to be the upside. You see, all of this is that dawah. You see, is that really, is that how Islam is spread? You see. Was that Islam that was spread then? If the Muslims moved in and all they did, if the Mongols moved in and all they did was just take over the Hadith position, well, that's not very Islamic, is it? Is that what they did, brother?
Well, talk about lessons from this event. In fact, there's a book written by a fellow called Nadvi, that's Andvi. I forget his first name, but the title of the book is Lessons of the Crusades and the Mongol Hordes. It's not a big book. That's where I found out about this event. Mm-hmm. And it's available on Amazon. Anyone can look it up. There may be a PDF version online as well. I'm not sure. But that's where I found out about it. So yes, this fellow who wrote the book about it is trying to draw lessons, for the Ummah from these events. One of the rare exceptions. Because like you said, we have so many apologists for traditional Islams, so many people who try to paper over all these bad things that were perpetrated in some cases by Muslims themselves, and who see things in binary terms. It's us versus them, us against them. Like George Bush one time said, but I think he stopped saying it, if you're not with us, you are against us. Otherwise, there's no middle ground. that we have a clash of civilizations, according to some of these people. The Darul Islam versus Darul Harb. The abode of peace against the abode of war or the abode of kufr. You see, this is binary simplistic thinking that is very typical of extremists who are not able to make finer distinctions than between two things, black and white. There are no shades of gray for these people. Unfortunately, Islamic education does not, traditional Islamic education, at least as much as I know about it, is not very analytical in its approach. People are not encouraged to think. They are not encouraged to ask questions. When people ask questions, they are scolded, reprimanded, sometimes even chased out of a school, like happened to a few people. So this anti-intellectualism is very, very dangerous, and has exacted a heavy price from the Ummah. It also left the Ummah badly behind in the areas of science and technology. As a number of people pointed out, in the middle of 19th century, around 1850 or so, when the Muslims came into contact with the West, they realized how backward they were. And that's when all those modernist movements began to spring up, like Jamaluddin al-Afghani, Muhammad Abdul Rashid Rida, and many others. And we had, of course, also, Quranist movements in India and also in Egypt. These were all attempts to respond to the misrepresentation of the teaching of the Book of Allah that transpired as a result of superimposing the hadith on the Book of Allah. And basically, the Book of Allah was buried under this heap of hadith, and also the work of scholars who even for themselves claimed the authority to abrogate, in some cases, the words of Allah. Can you believe this? There was a scholar by the name of Abul Hasan al-Karhi. He said, if anything we say conflicts or contradicts with what Allah says, consider Allah's words abrogated. My goodness, what is with these people? Yeah, and I got this from Taha Jabir al-Awani's book, by the way, 2017.
That's pure arrogance.
Pure arrogance, and it's not just arrogance, it's incredible ignorance, you see. So if this is the kind of scholars that are providing leadership for the Ummah, I pray to Allah to protect us from such scholars, because these people have just brought utter destruction on the Ummah with their misrepresentations, falsifications, and misinterpretations, of the Quran. Dr. Amahi mentions in his book, an excellent book, by the way, if I may, reiterate, The Muslim's Greatest Challenge, choosing between Islam and tradition. He estimates 95% of the traditional tafsir is unreliable. You are better off not to read it, because it will give you a distorted picture of what Allah Ta'ala is actually saying to us in the Book of Allah. And then the traditional scholars want to discourage us, to prevent us from reading the Quran by ourselves. In this, they are blocking actually the path of Allah, path to Allah, Sabilillah, because they are not allowing people to follow, to understand, and therefore to follow the Book of Allah, you see. So they are actually preventing people from being Muslims by preventing them from understanding and therefore from following, the Quran. So they throw all kinds of obstacles in the way of the people who want to follow the Quran. And then when people say, I follow the Quran only in matters of religion, the Quranis get accused of being, kafirs and what have you. Well, ask yourself, what did the Prophet follow? Did he follow Bukhari, Tirmidhi, Nasai, Ibn Majah, or any of these? Of course not. Well, then what did he follow? He followed the Book of Allah. So he was a Quranist, okay? So would you also accuse the Prophet of being this, that what you are accusing us? These people are so badly misguided, so misinformed. It's really catastrophic, brother. I'm at a loss for words. I just don't know what to do with these people anymore. But unfortunately, fortunately, we have a strong growing Quran only, or Quran centric, if you prefer, movement. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying throw out all the hadiths. After all, we follow the best hadith, which is the Quran, which also has the best tafsir, the best exegesis, best interpretation.
Yeah, right.
But we can still keep Bukhari for some purposes and the others. You want to find out a little bit about the history or the past. If anybody wants to do that, I say go ahead. You can find 98 hadiths in Bukhari that tells you where to put your hands when you pray. But here, 98 hadiths. But if you want to find about justice, reason, morality, ethics, freedom, or human rights, you will not find any book on any of those topics in Bukhari. You
No.
will need to go to the Quran, the Book of Allah. So you see, even the representation of Islam that we get in Bukhari is very, very different from what we get in the Book of Allah. So if the Ummah wants to rise up again, it needs to return to that which gave it strength and guidance in the first place, and that was not Bukhari. It was the Book of Allah, if I may put it that way. So
yes. Well,
but in terms of the people who objected, I could mention in 699, the
please.
leader of the Qadarites who believed in freedom of the will was beheaded by Marwan. And then in the following century, 786, 5,000 philosophers or rationalists, free thinkers, they were accused of free thinking. That was a crime according to the traditionists. They were slaughtered. This was mass murder once again. So what were the crimes of these people? And were there any Quran-centric or Quran-only people among them? We know from some sources that there were some Shias among them, some Alis as they are sometimes called. So there was a massive repression, a political repression, both intellectual and political, of people who wanted to use reason, who wanted to use their brains, their minds, to understand and follow the Quran. So we have this very deep streak of anti-rationalism in history, both intellectual and political. And my question to anyone who is concerned with this question, do you think this may be a manifestation of some kind of fanaticism? Because what is the difference between anti-rationalism and fanaticism? Doesn't fanaticism begin where rationalism ends? When you stop using your brain, then you are prime material to become a fanatic who acts on impulse without thinking of the consequences of his actions, and brings a lot of trouble on himself and all those around him. You see. So we are trying to revive the culture of rationalism. Omar Chapa is trying to do it. He has a paper on it. Is rationalism possible in a Muslim world? Muhammad Abdu of Egypt also responded. He tried to bring in a more rational approach to the deen, and there are quite a few other people who try to bring a return to reason. Let's go back to reason. Let's become reasonable once again, because in traditional Islam, reason is looked down upon as if it was something that can lead you to become a kafir. They even have a concept, I think I mentioned it before, the concept of al-kufr, that the very act of thinking can make you into a kafir. Now, what kind of nonsense is that? Look in the Quran, how many times does Allah tell us to use our brain? Afala ta'qilun. Tadabbur, reflection and pondering, tafakkur also mentioned. And he says in Surah 10, verse 100, that he will put filth and confusion, rijz is the Arabic term, on the people who do not use their reason. Surah number 8, verse 20, Allah says that the people who don't use their reason are worse than beasts and than animals. Yet the scholars are telling us not to use our reason. They are clearly contradicting Allah here. They are telling us the exact opposite message of what Allah is telling us. Allah is telling us to think, they are telling us not to think. Now, who would you prefer to believe? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or some alim who claims to be speaking on behalf of Allah? So I'm just shocked, and these struggles actually continue. We have these discussions on Clubhouse almost daily, and people are just clinging to the tradition as if their life depended on it. I think they have become enchanted by the traditions. It's as if somebody put a spell on them. They are under a spell, and that spell has to be broken. A person cannot have two. Yeah, go ahead, bro, if you want to add something.
No. Well, a person. You brought up an important point. This is a psychological point, and it has to do with mass psychosis, if you will, because this is a form of denial that is accepted by the entire nation, and it's an apologetic for absurd positions, you see. And because you have accepted reason, and you cannot, as an individual and as a scholar, you cannot reconcile these two. You're not subject to this this conflict, this inner conflict, of holding two different positions and that contradict each other, and just walking on the earth as if it doesn't matter, when in fact they do matter. It matters very much, especially in the terms of eternal repercussions. So. We can definitely say that this I want to pursue this Baghdad thing a little bit further, and I will with other conversations that I'm having with other people. Professor Ramahi, by the way, is going to join us again next week for a new webinar, and I'll try and sort this out so that you can join us, and maybe Instructor Bilal can join us, and we can have maybe a 2-hour webinar here where some students can just jump in and fire away with the questions. I'll act as the moderator and see if we can't pull your minds together and try and crystallize some of this astral confusion that still exists in the metaphysical realm here, because I'm sure people who listen to us today, many of our listeners, there's this business about Baghdad and how the Muslims mistreated the Mongols and invited this destruction. I'm sure most of them don't know about it. I mean, look, we were in the middle of the most learned alim on the face of the earth with respect to Islam, and they didn't know, or they didn't want to talk about it. Those who did know didn't want to talk about it. I mean, I just encountered this same speechlessness, on the part of professors when I brought up the subject. They don't know what to say. They don't know how to react. And one of the reasons they don't know how to react is because of this conditioning, this mesmerization, if you will. Because it is a spell. They're under a spell. And because they're under a spell, they can't use the reason in a spontaneous fashion to come up with a rational argument that's going to defend their position, because they have no defense. It's just their position is indefensible. So rather than try and defend something that can't be defended, they just ignore it. Okay, then this is human denial. And this kind of ignore is a manifestation of ignorance. You see, which is what you just mentioned a few minutes ago. You're flabbergasted by this ignorance, this arrogance, and combined with ignorance. Well, gosh, that's compounded ignorance now, isn't it? Because that's what got the Muslims into trouble to begin with. We're God's people, and God's with us, and we're not going to lose, so let's just go out and do it. Allah Akbar, and they get into this crazy manifestation of a irrational position, which is a reactionary position, actually, you see, because there's no thought involved. They just react. And when there's no thought, then there's no investiture of Allah sitting on the crown or the earth here, you see, to guide us. There's no guidance. So this is the blind leading the blind into the mud of which is actually quicksand, and that's where they get swallowed. And they get swallowed, and then they throw their hands up and say, "Where's the God of Muhammad?" You saw the pictures of the women out in the street there after the bombing of Baghdad. You say, "Where's the God of Muhammad? How did this happen to my children?" You see, how does that poor woman? How does she apologize for that? How does she get to that point? She got to that point because she's a blind person following blind leadership, you see. And so what happened to Baghdad in the 12th century recurred again in the 20th century. And I don't think there's an end of it, because the Jews are doing the same thing now. Oh, we're the chosen. We're just going to, mop up what's left of Gaza here, if there's anything going to be anything left. But that's going to lead to their own destruction, because I know from my own occult research that to destroy Israel is part and parcel of the world global governance. They want to take Israel out of the picture and just have themselves a nice new universal church, which has some Abrahamic trappings under the auspices of the Vatican in Jerusalem. So that's going to be a kind of a new global governance. But it's leading to the destruction of what the Jews are manifesting, or think they're going to manifest as their messianic kingdom. It'll look like that, but it's actually going to lead to their destruction. So all of this is spiritual warfare that's taking place according to the spiritual law, which is going to lead to the same demise whether it's the Jews or acting as the chosen, or whether it's the Muslims acting as the chosen. They're both acting on false premises. So they're both arguing from a position of the straw man. Oh, our theological position is correct. Oh, our theological is more correct because we're standing on the hadith. What about, what about? Then there comes along people like yourself or myself, and we say, well, what about the Sunnah of Allah? No one's looked at that, you see. And that's what we're supposed to be looked at. Because the Quran says, look, my Sunnah doesn't change. I always deal with people in the same fashion. Look at those who came before you. They were established in the earth even greater, far greater than you will ever be established. And I destroyed them. And it's the same sin that destroyed them, their ignorant arrogance, this compounded ignorance, which enters the throne room, okay, of whatever their political position is, and causes them to arrogantly commit misdeeds in the name of Allah. Now, Allah's not going to stand for that. Of course not. And the laws of the universe are set up so that it can't be stood for. You can't operate from that position and expect ongoing victories, which is what the blind people do. They say they keep on making the same mistakes, and they say we're going to get it better next time. No, it's not going to happen. Your mistakes are only going to get worse. The destruction, the judgment are going to get worse, etc., etc. So there were some people that stood up and tried to revise, and I'm seeing evidence now, brother, that even these conversations that we're having are having some repercussions out there. I'm seeing more and more evidence of younger people coming out and saying, no. This hadith position is in error. We have to go back to the Quran. I just saw somebody just sent me a video of Numan Ali Khan, and he's criticizing the video because Numan Ali Khan is defending the hadith. And he says, Numan Ali Khan is right out of his mouth. He said, the science of the hadith is equal to the science of the Quran. That's a confounded, ignorant statement to make. And it shows you how blind even someone as informed as he is because of this charm. The hadith has charmed the scholars. The hadith has charmed the how shall I put it? It's charmed the ummah, charmed the common people, so that they're no different than Christians waiting for the three wise men to come and visit the Christ child on the night of the Nativity. They accept all of these traditions, all of these fairy tales as something that's true. There might be some evidence of truth in there, but the Christian tradition is even crazier than some of the hadith that we've seen, you see. But they're all defending a false premise, which is the straw man. And when you're going to argue with Allah with the straw man premise to begin with, hey, there's no way you're going to be able to stand, because Allah has to do is bring that fire, and your straw man's gone up in flames. It's gone. Okay. And that's what I'm trying to get the point made across here. Look, the Abbasids got Baghdad destroyed because of their position in defending the hadith, which they fabricated. Okay. So they believed their own lie. And that's another psychological manifestation of a kind of psychosis, you see. So this is a group psychosis. So we're trying to pull our listeners and trying to pull the systems away from this psychosis, okay? Because it's toxic. It's toxic. And it's toxic to the point that they will actually consider themselves being justified in killing you or myself or anyone else who's talking in these terms. They'll kill us and think they're doing God a favor. Okay. That's a human condition. It's all too human. Okay. And we want to rise above that so that we become the Khalifa, okay, of righteousness, and we can only become the Khalifa of righteousness if we're using these noodles here, all rolled up between that skull. You see, if we don't use them, if we don't use them, we're going to lose them. Okay, and that's what's happened.
Yeah,
The
that's
ummah's
right.
lost its mind.
Yeah, that's right.
They've lost their mind.
Absolutely.
So let's take this up again in a couple of weeks,
Okay.
brother. And if I can arrange with Ramahi and Benjamin to have ourselves a 2-hour webinar or so over the next week or so, would you be amenable to joining us?
Yes, it would be my pleasure, in fact, to join such a distinguished company. Absolutely.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Inshallah. Yes, go on.
So yeah, I actually look forward to that. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful.
Let's hope it works out.
Wonderful. Okay. Anything you want to add before we close here, brother?
No, I think that's about it. If I think of something, I'll save it for next time.
Okay, very good. Well, if I don't see you beforehand, we'll see you again in 2 weeks on Tuesday morning, 2 weeks from now, inshallah. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.